So spring is one of the most exciting times for gardens because that is when things are the most alive and vibrant, and even though we technically still have a few more weeks of winter here in Brisbane, it is basically springtime. Always put sunscreen on when I go outside. This is like not sponsored or anything, but I am obsessed with this brand. Has no white cast whatsoever. I can wear it under makeup. It's literally like clear and it feels amazing. It feels like primer. Best sunscreen I've ever worn. But yeah, I'm putting on my sunscreen because I'm about to head outside and start prepping my garden for spring. So I have a whole bunch of tasks and things that I want to get done to basically make sure that my garden can thrive throughout spring. Are you ready to go outside, Rock? You ready to go outside? He's a sleepy boy. Let's go into the garden.
One of the most important things you can do to prepare for spring is to revitalize your soil. Ensure that your soil is healthy so that it will support plant growth all throughout spring. Enrich your soil using a blend of compost, well-aged manure, or organic matter. Make sure that you've got a robust composting system to transform your kitchen and garden scraps into nutrient-rich compost. Adding compost to your soil is going to help the structure of your soil, but it's also going to add a lot of nutrients to help things grow. Now, when it comes to additional nutrients, you may want to add fertilizers to your garden, and there's a whole different range of fertilizers you could use. I advocate opting for organic fertilizers or even vegan fertilizers if you are a vegan. But when it comes to organic fertilizers, also making sure you actually look at what the fertilizer is made from, because just because something is organic doesn't mean it's necessarily natural. So have a look, find something that works for you and your garden and your budget. When it comes to soil revitalization, I would focus on these 4 tasks. Do a soil assessment, so determine what the pH levels are. Do some simple soil tests to see the composition, the structure and the texture of your soil. So I have a video on this. It's all about simple soil tests that you can conduct that will tell you a little bit more about your soil texture and structure. Then focus on adding compost. In that same video, I show you a really simple way to create a compost bin just out of a regular old garbage bin. And I think this is really valuable. It's really affordable and it will help you to add lots of organic matter to your soil. And finally, cover cropping. So making sure that you have not got any bare soil. So this is going to cause erosion. It's going to lose a lot of the nutrients and organic matter in the soil. And so you want to make sure that you have a lot of cover crops to cover those gaps in your garden. One of the most exciting spring tasks is seed starting and propagating to really cultivate abundance in our gardens. Coming into a new season means that there are lots of new things that can be planted, so it is the perfect time to start your seeds and your seedlings. Depending on where you live, you might need to kick off your growing season by initiating your seeds indoors or in a greenhouse to get a bit of a head start. Now, if you want to expand your garden's diversity, you could also consider propagating some of the perennial plants that you already have or that your friends or your neighbours have through cuttings. When it comes to starting seeds, you want to make sure you're growing them in something that allows for a lot of free drainage. So make sure you've got some good seed trays, pots or containers, and then transplant the seeds when they have developed a really strong root system. Now, when it comes to propagation, you can take cuttings from your existing plants. If you want, you can start them in a little bit of rooting hormone, or you can just pop them into water or straight into some soil. You can also divide your existing plants, like ground covers and things like that are really easy to divide and pop into new parts of the garden or in their own pots. It's also good to remember to use a really high quality potting mix. So you can get a specific seed starting mix or just a really good premium potting mix. The The next task is to think about your crop rotation and do some planning. It's a really good idea to map out your garden layout with strategic crop rotation in mind. This is not only going to prevent the buildup of a lot of soil-borne diseases and pests, but it's also going to optimize the use of any available space that you have. So have a look into companion planting techniques to foster some harmonious relationships between different plant species, and try and choose a diverse range of crops, including perennial edibles and native plants, to have a really resilient and self-sustaining ecosystem. Like with most things, the planning and research involved is often the least exciting, but it can have the most impact in your garden if done right. So a couple of things I would look at doing for spring is just understanding the crop families and grouping different plants together depending on their nutrient needs or how well they grow together. Have a look at mapping your garden zones. So you could either look into the permaculture zones. I have a video all about that. Or you could even look at sun mapping on your property and planting according to the light needs of your plants. Always look at integrating perennial plants as much as possible. I know that a lot of people who might be renting tend to avoid perennials or planting things on the actual property that they live in because it is a time and money investment that you are not going to be able to take with you when you move. Now, my general approach to this is I always try to get 2 of any perennial that I grow. So I'll plant 1 in the actual garden. And this is important because it's not only going to build a healthier ecosystem on this property, but it's also going to have something for the future people that live here, which I think really aligns with the principles of permaculture. But I also keep another one in a pot for me. So whatever the appropriate pot is, whether it's a grow bag, whether it's a really large pot for a dwarf fruit tree, I will keep that one for myself so that I can take it with me when I move. The next task for your spring garden prep is mulching for optimal growth. So lay down a generous layer of organic mulch to retain your soil's moisture, suppress any weeds, and maintain a consistent soil temperature. This is going to reduce the need for excessive watering. It's going to minimize the presence of any invasive weeds that might steal nutrients from your edible crops. And it's also going to curb the reliance that you have on any kind of synthetic intervention.
Personally, I love sugarcane mulch because even though it is easier to break down and you might need to mulch more often, because I have really hard clay soil, as it breaks down, it's adding just that extra layer of biomass to my soil, and then it's actually feeding the soil. So that's why I love to use sugarcane mulch. But have a look at the best type of mulch to suit your area and your particular garden.
A couple of things to do before you mulch is to obviously choose the right type of mulch and prepare the site. So you want to clear it of any weeds or any debris and large rocks. Make sure that the soil is nice and moist before you apply the mulch. And you want to layer it nice and thick, but try and keep it away from any plant stems that might rot. Now, if you have some ground covers in your garden, I like to leave a little bit of space around the actual plant where the plant can get to that soil and it's going to want to spread. It can make it a lot more difficult to spread across the ground if there is mulch in the way and it's not able to get its roots down nice and deep in that soil. Now, in keeping with the permaculture principles, you can also follow the chop and drop method, which is where you prune your plants and you basically just leave the trimmed plant materials on the ground as natural mulch. This is something that I have been doing. All of your plants are hopefully going to grow nice and big throughout spring, so you want to make sure that you are staking and supporting that plant growth. As part of your spring garden prep, ensure that your shrubs or any climbers are going to receive the support that they need to grow nice and healthy. So you can add stakes to the garden to prevent them bending or breaking under the weight of their fruit.
When it comes to staking and supporting your plants, I find that the kind of most affordable and easiest option is to just use these bamboo stakes that you can get from your local garden centre. They are reusable. They might not last as long as metal ones, but they are super affordable. And then I just use this jute twine to tie the things to the stake. This is biodegradable, super affordable. It's like $3 for this big roll, and that is what I recommend. This is what I will be using in my garden.
Also, it's important to look at repotting some of the plants that you have in pots into larger containers to allow their roots to have plenty of room to stretch and thrive. It's a good idea to do a little survey of your garden and have a look to see if there is anything growing in pots that might need to be repotted so that there's plenty of room for them to grow. And it's also a good idea to have a look at whether you have any climbers or shrubs that are going to either need staking or a trellis to support their growth, and get that in nice and early so you don't have to worry about doing it later. When it comes to repotting, have a look at this. This is what it looks like when the roots are all bound up and there's not a lot of room for them to go anywhere. So the plant is not going to get much bigger and healthier than what it is. So by putting it into a new pot about a third of the size up, you can make sure that it's got plenty of room to spread its roots and get more nutrients. Harnessing the power of rainwater with an efficient rainwater harvesting system is honestly ideal, and it is a hallmark of sustainable gardening. But if you don't have access to rainwater tanks, you can still take action to make sure you are efficiently watering your garden with the appropriate irrigation setup. Now, this doesn't have to be anything complex. You can just install drip systems or soaker hoses or weeper hoses. You can also just be careful when you are directly watering your garden if you water by hand. There are lots of things you can do to just be mindful of your watering habits. So always checking the moisture of the soil before you water, making sure to water nice and deep, and that way you can do it less frequently for healthier plant growth. Always be mindful of the time of day. You want to be doing it early in the morning or late in the afternoon. And of course, you can use a watering can or a hose with a controllable spray nozzle to just be a little bit more precise. Now, of course, you want to avoid over-watering your plants. And one of the simplest tests you can do to see if they need to be watered is just a little soil check. So you dip your finger into the soil just like this, and if the soil is nice and moist, then it does not need to be watered. Now, of course, we want to make sure we are practicing holistic pest and disease management. So you can put into practice an integrated pest management strategy. Now, it's a good idea to foster habitat for a lot of beneficial insects and predators by diversifying your plant species and making sure that we have a pollinator-friendly garden. You can also employ companion planting techniques and include physical barriers to deter pests in your garden, and obviously just maintain vigilant monitoring to detect any issues when they arise. And what we really want to be doing is emphasizing proactive prevention and ecological harmony rather than reacting to an invasion or disease. So obviously it's important to keep observing our garden and just have these preventative measures in place, ensuring that we have a lot of beneficial insects, any physical barriers or trap crops, and we practice companion planting. But it is kind of inevitable that pests and diseases will arise in the garden. So trying to take a more holistic approach and figuring out why this is happening and trying to get to the root cause. And for the situations that we simply can't control, it's always good to opt for a sustainable alternative. So going for those natural sprays and organic pesticides or weed killers is always my last resort, but it's still something that I have to do sometimes.
I hope you guys found this video helpful. I'm really looking forward to my first spring in this garden, and I know that just being prepared is really going to prevent me from getting overwhelmed in the future. So I hope this inspires you to get out there and get prepared in your garden for spring.